Nancy Guthrie investigation and some of the information that I've learned from some of the profilers that I talked to. And I wanted to see, like, as an agent, how you would put that into action actually with the investigation. But the first thing I wanted to ask you about is this new information coming from Brianna Whitney, who's a reporter with the CBS station in Phoenix. And that's one of the stations that received the first two ransom letters, the ones that we believe Savannah was referencing when she said that she thought two were real. And they're now divulging, the station, that when they looked back into the Bitcoin wallet, there was activity on February 10th, and there's been no activity since. So this would have been a couple of months ago, right when the letters first came out. And a small amount of money was put into the account, along with a note that said, "We are ready to talk. Contact us." And then there was a link for how to reach out to them. And there's no way to know for sure that that was the FBI or Savannah Guthrie, but it seems like it would kind of make sense. What do you think it means that they put that note in there, but it seems there was no response?
Well, I don't think we know that there was no response. There was no response that was visible to us. But I think that what that is the FBI saying, if it was the FBI, which makes sense, it's them saying, "Hey, we're in a negotiation here. This is not something where we're going to play the game where you just dictate terms to us, because it's that whole thing. Well, this is your only mother. You want her back, so you better meet our terms." And they would say, "We're your only victims, so if you don't get money from us, you don't get a dime." So we're both in this, a zero-sum end game. I mean, this is big, and so there is wiggle room in negotiations. I can guarantee you, not every negotiation, but it really depends on how you do the negotiation. If you start, I know this sounds horrible, but it's like negotiating on a house or a car price, where if you come in and seem desperate, they will not budge. If they come in and seem truly, yes, we desperately want her back, but we're not going to set a precedent. This is not you make a demand, we fulfill the demand. This is a negotiation, and this is going to be how it works.
Do you think that there was just that one entry from February 10th. Are you surprised they haven't tried again in terms of the FBI or the Guthries?
I'm not, but again, I don't know what they know. Maybe I would be surprised. And in the FBI, in the same case, there's going to be a case agent, there's going to be a supervisor, there's going to be the supervisor's boss, the assistant special agent in charge, and then it goes all the way to the president in this case.
79 days. No arrest. No answers. No Nancy. But tonight, that changes. Because top FBI profilers have just revealed something that is going to make you look at this case completely differently. They believe Nancy Guthrie knew the person who took her. Not a stranger. Not a random predator who picked her by chance. Someone she recognized. Someone she may have opened the door for. Someone she trusted. Think about how chilling that is. An 84-year-old woman, in her own home, possibly face-to-face with someone from her own life in the final moments before she vanished. And now, just when this investigation felt like it was going nowhere, a digital trail has surfaced inside the kidnapper's own Bitcoin wallet. A clue, sitting right there in plain sight. The kind of mistake that criminals make when they think nobody is watching closely enough. Well, we are watching. 79 days of silence. 79 days of unanswered questions. 79 days of a family waiting. And the person who took Nancy Guthrie may have just made their first real mistake. Stay with me. Because we are going back to the very beginning tonight, and nothing is going to look the same by the time we are done. 79 days. That is how long Nancy Guthrie has been gone. But today, something shifts. Because the people who have spent their careers studying the darkest corners of human behavior, the profilers, the behavioral analysts, the former FBI agents who have worked kidnappings across this country for decades, they are no longer talking about a stranger. They are no longer building a profile around someone who picked Nancy at random, who drove through that neighborhood on a whim and made a split-second decision. As the search in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson enters its 80th day, veteran investigators have shifted their focus toward an insider theory, suggesting Nancy Guthrie was snatched by an associate. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, who has tracked this case since the beginning, insists the perpetrator arrived at the property equipped with a kidnapping kit and possessed intimate knowledge of the family's security. Let that land for a second. A kidnapping kit. Intimate knowledge. They came ready. They came knowing exactly what they were walking into. And that changes everything. Jennifer Coffindaffer told Newsweek that the surveillance video showing the masked individual on Guthrie's doorstep on the night she disappeared indicated that the suspect was familiar with the location. It makes no sense to me that this wasn't completely targeted, she said. The individual who approached that door, if you looked at the 3-second clip, head down and beelines toward that camera. They knew exactly where that camera was. Think about what that means in practical terms. You are standing outside the home of an 84-year-old woman at 1:47 in the morning. You are masked. You are carrying a backpack. And instead of hesitating, instead of looking around to get your bearings, instead of slowing down the way any unfamiliar person would in an unfamiliar place, you walk directly, deliberately, and immediately toward the one thing that could expose you. The camera. Coffindaffer also said she believes the perpetrator is likely someone who knows Guthrie in some way. That means either family, that could mean somebody who worked in her employ, somebody who was close to her, someone who had been inside that house, someone who had walked those rooms, someone who knew the layout, knew the security, and knew that on the night of January 31st, Nancy Guthrie would be home, alone, vulnerable, and completely unaware of what was coming. Forensic researcher Gary Brucato also shared his assessment, suggesting that the suspect likely had some level of familiarity with the victim. Accused who did this probably has some passing relationship, at least, with this victim, he said, adding that the individual may have even spent time inside the home before the incident. Not just drove past, not just watched from a distance, was physically present inside that space at some point before the night everything changed. Now ask yourself, who does that describe? Who walks through the private home of an 84-year-old woman with enough regularity that they know where the cameras are, know the layout of the property, know when she will be alone. The list is not as long as you might think. Family, close friends, caregivers, maintenance workers, contractors, people trusted enough to be let in through the front door. And here is where this theory gets even more unsettling. Coffindaffer described the case as likely an inside job, adding that she does not believe the suspect pictured in the surveillance video operated alone. I do not think this is a one-person job, she said. She theorized that along with the person suspected of abducting Guthrie, there is the person behind this whole situation, and possibly others who have been involved in keeping Guthrie hidden after she was taken. One person on the ground, one person behind the curtain pulling the strings, and possibly others keeping that secret buried for nearly 3 months. That is not desperation. That is organization. And organized crimes with multiple participants are exponentially harder to solve, because silence becomes a shared survival strategy. Everyone involved knows that the moment one person talks, everyone goes down. So nobody talks. And Nancy Guthrie stays missing. FBI Phoenix confirmed after a forensic analysis of the doorbell camera footage by the FBI's Operational Technology Division that the suspect is described as a male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build. In the video, he is wearing a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack. A specific backpack. A specific brand. A specific size. The FBI forensic team identified it down to the exact model. and investigators began pulling on that thread, analyzing a glove found near Guthrie's home for DNA and reviewing Walmart sales records tied to the suspect's backpack and clothing. The person who took Nancy Guthrie shopped for their equipment. They made purchases. They left a commercial trail that potentially connects a real human being to a real store transaction on a real date. And the FBI is looking at every single one of those records. But the preparation does not stop at the backpack and the kit. A doorbell camera was tampered with, and Guthrie's blood was splattered at the home. Her blood, inside and outside the home, which tells you that whatever happened that night was not quiet. It was not clean. It was not the smooth, controlled operation that a kidnapper with this level of preparation had clearly planned for. Burgess thinks the blood found on the interior and exterior of Guthrie's home could signify that the kidnapper's initial mission hit a snag. "I think something went very wrong inside the house," Burgess said. Something went wrong. And this is where the profilers begin to diverge on what happened next. Because when a plan this carefully assembled starts to unravel in the first moments of execution, the decisions made in those next few seconds define everything that follows. Dr. Gary Brucato theorized, "What I think is this person got kind of hired or asked to do this in a pragmatic way. When you take all that information and put it all together, what it looks like is nothing went the way it was supposed to go." Hired or asked. That word choice is deliberate. Brucato is not describing someone who woke up one morning and decided to kidnap an 84-year-old woman for personal reasons. He is describing someone who was brought into this operation by somebody else. Someone who received instructions. Someone who had a role to play in a plan that was designed by a different mind entirely. Which means somewhere out there, possibly living an entirely ordinary life, possibly someone who has already appeared on the edges of this investigation, is the architect. The person who identified Nancy as a target. The person who assembled the team. The person who decided that an 84-year-old widow living alone in Tucson, Arizona was worth taking. And that person knew her. Forensic researcher Gary Brucato has supported this theory, stating the probability is very high that the accused has a history of inappropriate or criminal behavior known to Nancy's social circle. Known to her social circle. Already embedded in the world around her. Already a face she would recognize. A name she might have said out loud in conversation without ever imagining what that person was quietly planning. The trust that is the most dangerous kind is the trust that was never questioned. And while profilers build this portrait from the outside, the FBI is pursuing a trail that the kidnapper almost certainly believed was untraceable. They were wrong. Because Bitcoin, the currency demanded in every single ransom note sent in this case, is not as invisible as it appears. And what investigators have just found inside that digital wallet could be the first real crack in this entire case. They thought cryptocurrency would protect them. They thought that by demanding Bitcoin, by routing their ransom demand through a decentralized digital currency with no central bank, no traditional paper trail, no obvious human face attached to it, they had found a way to get paid without getting caught. They were wrong. Experts tell CBS News that law enforcement officials can track down information about the people or organizations behind crypto transactions, increasing the chances that the ransom demand could produce possible leads in the Guthrie case. All Bitcoin transactions are recorded and monitored on the public blockchain, which is similar to a bank ledger. Every single movement of that Bitcoin, every transaction in, every transaction out, every wallet address connected to every transfer, all of it permanently recorded, permanently visible, permanently available to anyone with the tools and the knowledge to read it. Bitcoin is a traceable currency which authorities can track. You can actually see where that Bitcoin address is in that wallet, and any transactions that go in and out, said former FBI counterintelligence operative Eric O'Neill. That gives the FBI in particular a very excellent avenue to start learning who owns the wallet, because at some point when you take money in cryptocurrency, you have to turn it into cash, otherwise it's worthless. Worthless. That is the word that matters most here. Because a Bitcoin wallet full of ransom money does nothing for you until you convert it, until you move it through an exchange, until you connect it, at some point, in some way, to the real-world financial system. And the moment you do that, you leave a trail. The FBI has launched a major trace of Bitcoin transactions in Arizona as agents race to find Nancy Guthrie. Investigators say the missing persons inquiry is now leaning heavily on blockchain analysis, with the Bureau describing the Bitcoin work as a key part of the search. A key part of the search. Not a side project. Not a secondary avenue. The FBI has made blockchain analysis a central pillar of this investigation, which tells you that there is something in that digital record worth pursuing. Something that has caught their attention. A Bitcoin address on its own does not reveal who controls it, but blockchain forensics firms are typically able to find clues that point to the owner's location. In many cases, the Bitcoin wallet will list transactions tied to a third party, who may possess data about the owner's identity. Third-party transactions. Connected wallets. Digital fingerprints that link one address to another, and eventually, to a real person sitting somewhere with a real identity and a real history that the FBI can knock on the door of. Harvey Levin, the founder of TMZ, said the outlet received a third letter from a person claiming to know the identity of who abducted Nancy Guthrie and that they now want the full $100,000 FBI reward in Bitcoin. A third letter. And this time, the demand has changed. Not just a ransom for Nancy's release, but a payment for information. The person writing these letters is now positioning themselves not as a kidnapper, but as a witness. Someone on the inside of this operation who knows who did it, knows where Nancy was taken, and is willing to sell that information to the highest bidder. The person told TMZ that they don't trust the FBI, and that is why they are using the outlet as an intermediary. The person said he wants a fraction of a Bitcoin worth $50,000 upfront, and that they would provide the name of the main individual and tracking information. The name of the main individual. Not one of the people involved. Not a peripheral player. The main individual. The architect. The person who designed and directed this entire operation. That phrasing is deliberate. And it is telling. Because it confirms what the profilers have been building toward, that this was not a solo act. There is a hierarchy here. There is someone at the top who gave the orders. And somewhere below them, there is a person who knows exactly who that is and is now trying to profit from that knowledge a second time. The latest message is the first to reference a specific location, claiming Nancy Guthrie was seen in Sonora, Mexico. It is also the first in which the sender alleges she has now died. The note also criticized the FBI for dismissing earlier messages as a scam. She has now died. That phrase sits in the middle of a letter demanding Bitcoin for information. And it raises the most uncomfortable question this case has produced yet. If Nancy Guthrie is dead, who benefits from staying quiet? Who has the most to lose if this case is solved? And why would the person writing these letters wait until now to say it out loud? Former FBI agent Coffindaffer urged authorities to use the request for Bitcoin for information. Bitcoin is highly traceable, she said. Yes, the money would be gone, but to convert to USD, the blockchain would provide clues. The money would be gone, but the trail would remain. And that trail, that digital thread woven through the blockchain, is exactly what the FBI is now pulling. Transaction by transaction. Wallet by wallet. Connection by connection. Getting closer. Here is a detail that should make every single person following this case stop and take a breath. While the FBI was building its blockchain analysis, while profilers were constructing their insider theory, while the family waited and the public watched and the world asked why no arrest had been made, a critical piece of physical evidence was sitting in a private laboratory in Florida for 11 weeks. The case has been further mired in a dispute over a staggering DNA evidence delay, after it was revealed a hair sample sat in a private Florida laboratory for 11 weeks before finally being transferred to the FBI laboratory. 11 weeks. That is not a processing delay. That is not a backlog issue. That is not an unavoidable consequence of an overwhelmed forensic system. That is 2.5 months of a hair sample. Physical evidence collected from the scene of an 84-year-old woman's kidnapping, sitting in the wrong place while the FBI waited for it. An FBI official told ABC News, "There is no new DNA evidence in the Nancy Guthrie case. The FBI requested this material over 2 months ago. The Pima County Sheriff's Office sent it to a private lab in Florida. 11 weeks later, that lab has now transferred an original hair sample to the FBI laboratory for testing. We remain fully committed to this investigation. The FBI requested it over 2 months ago. Over 2 months ago, federal agents identified a specific piece of evidence they needed. They made the request through the proper channels. And the Pima County Sheriff's Office, the same office that released the crime scene prematurely, the same office now under investigation by the Board of Supervisors, sent that evidence to a private lab in Florida instead of directly to the FBI laboratory. And it sat there for 11 weeks. Coffin Daffer, who spent years working inside the Bureau, did not hide her frustration. The fact that they're saying the FBI has this advanced technology, they would have always had it, she said, arguing that the sample should have gone directly to federal agents. Always had it. That is the critical phrase. The technology needed to analyze this hair sample was not something that needed to be developed or sourced or requested. It existed. It was available. The FBI laboratory had the capability to process this evidence from the moment it was collected. But the evidence never went there. Instead, it went to a private lab in another state and sat untouched for 11 weeks while Nancy Guthrie remained missing. The material is now being subjected to what officials have described as new advanced technology in the hope of identifying Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper. The FBI then clarified that this was not fresh evidence at all. Not fresh evidence. Evidence that has been in existence since the early days of this investigation. Evidence that should have been in federal hands from the beginning. Evidence that, had it been processed when it was first collected, might have produced a name, a match, a suspect, weeks or months ago. Instead, it arrives at the FBI laboratory more than 2 months into the disappearance. And now a new question hangs over this entire investigation. Was that delay an accident? An administrative failure? A breakdown in the chain of custody that nobody anticipated? Or was it something else entirely? Because here is what we know about this case. The crime scene was released too early. The cadaver dogs were never deployed. The DNA samples were complex and unmatched. And now we learn that a hair sample collected from the scene sat in the wrong laboratory for 11 weeks before reaching the agency with the best technology to analyze it. Every single one of those failures points in the same direction. Away from solving this case. More than 2 months after Nancy Guthrie vanished, a former FBI agent says the people who took her knew she would likely die, and used ransom notes to torment her family anyway. Jennifer Coffin Daffer wrote on X that authorities identified the motive as kidnapping for ransom, and added bluntly, Nancy sadly died. She accused the kidnappers of deliberately tormenting the Guthrie family. The kidnappers didn't care and tortured the family with 2 notes knowing the FBI would not recommend paying a ransom without proof of life. They sent notes knowing there would be no proof of life. They demanded Bitcoin knowing the family could not safely pay without confirmation she was alive. They watched Savannah Guthrie grieve on national television and sent another letter on the exact day she returned to work. Not because they wanted to help find her. Because they wanted to watch the family suffer. And while all of this unfolds, while the blockchain analysis runs and the hair sample finally reaches the right laboratory and the profilers build their insider theory, there is one more detail that the people who know this case most intimately say changes the entire psychological profile of whoever did this. It has to do with what was in those ransom notes. Something nobody has talked about publicly until now. There is something strange about the ransom notes in the Nancy Guthrie case. Not the demands themselves. Not the Bitcoin. Not the specific location claim or the allegation that Nancy was seen alive in Mexico. Those have all been widely reported and widely analyzed. The strange thing is the language. A former FBI agent has shared a theory about the purported ransom notes that were sent in connection with the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. There has still been no sign of the 84-year-old since she was reported missing in early February, despite a massive search. In the days after she disappeared, multiple news outlets reported receiving ransom notes, but authorities have not said whether any were authentic. But here is what Coffin Daffer noticed. Something subtle. Something that most people scrolled past without registering its significance. Referencing Savannah Guthrie's responses to the senders of the notes, Coffindaffer said the Today co-host's efforts to reach out have sometimes been religious. She wrote, "Initially, I thought it was because Savannah was religious. But what if the decision was made to use religion because scripture was in the note? What if the notes were from someone quoting scripture or referencing scripture? Scripture. In a ransom note. Think about who writes a ransom note that includes religious language. Think about the psychology behind embedding a spiritual reference inside a criminal demand for money. That is not the language of an opportunistic criminal. That is not the vocabulary of someone who selected Nancy Guthrie randomly and decided to exploit her family for financial gain. That is personal. That is specific. That is the language of someone who knows their audience. Someone who knows that the Guthrie family is deeply religious, deeply faithful, and deeply attuned to the kind of communication that carries spiritual weight. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has offered a new theory about the person or persons who kidnapped Nancy Guthrie. In a live stream on X, Jennifer raised the concern that the specific contents of the ransom notes received by TMZ or local media outlets haven't fully been shared with the public. The full contents have not been shared, which means what the public knows about these notes is only a fraction of what is actually written inside them. There are details, specific, potentially identifying details, that law enforcement is holding close, that the family knows but has not disclosed, that the people who sent those letters know exactly what they wrote. And Savannah Guthrie's response to those letters, the specific language she has used in her public appeals, the religious tone, the carefully chosen words, may not simply be a reflection of her own faith. The idea of Savannah and her siblings mirroring the words in the ransom note is a fascinating one. It makes sense that talking to the kidnapper in their language may beg for a response. Mirroring. It is a psychological technique used in hostage negotiation and behavioral communication. You reflect back the language of the person you are trying to reach. You speak in the register they recognize. You use the words, the tone, the references that will feel familiar and safe to them. And in doing so, you open a channel. Savannah Guthrie standing in front of a camera and speaking directly to whoever took her mother, using language that echoes what was written in those notes, is not just grief. It may be strategy. Carefully coordinated strategy developed with the guidance of people who understand how kidnappers think and what makes them respond. Burgess thinks nailing down a motive will lead investigators down the road of solving the case. While a motive or identity of potential suspects has not been publicly shared by authorities, the profiler says vengeance could play a role in the investigation. Vengeance. A personal grievance. A score that someone decided could only be settled through the most extreme and violent means available. Not just money. Not purely financial. Something that goes deeper than a ransom demand. Due to reported ransom notes involving Bitcoin, Burgess doesn't think money can be immediately ruled out as a possible motive. It's got to be someone who knows something about Bitcoin, she said, later adding, money has to come in at some level, whether how primary it is we don't know, unless it was staged to throw everybody off. Staged. To throw everybody off. What if the Bitcoin demands were never really about the money? What if the ransom notes, the cryptocurrency, the anonymous letters to media outlets, what if all of it was designed not to extract payment but to redirect attention? To keep investigators focused on financial motive while the real reason for taking Nancy Guthrie stayed buried? Whether Nancy Guthrie is alive or dead has not been officially confirmed by any law enforcement agency. The evidence that has surfaced publicly, blood on the porch, a disconnected pacemaker, a masked armed figure on camera at 1:47 a.m., ransom notes with insider details, and total silence from the captors, paints a picture that grows darker with each passing week. A disconnected pacemaker. Blood on the porch. A figure who moved through that property like someone who had been there before. Notes with insider details that only someone close to this family could have known. And through all of it, no suspect has been publicly identified beyond the masked figure on the doorbell camera. No arrests have been made. 79 days. No arrest. No closure. No Nancy. But tonight, 3 separate threads are pulling tighter simultaneously. The FBI's blockchain analysis of the Bitcoin wallet is active and ongoing. A hair sample is finally being processed with advanced federal technology after sitting idle for 11 weeks. And a team of profilers who have spent their careers inside the minds of people capable of crimes like this one have landed on a conclusion they are no longer hedging. As the search enters its 80th day, veteran investigators have shifted their focus toward an insider theory, suggesting the 84-year-old mother of Today host Savannah Guthrie was snatched by an associate. Someone she knew. Someone she trusted. Someone who walked through her front door not as a threat, but as a familiar face. And somewhere in the intersection of that insider knowledge, that Bitcoin trail, that hair sample, and those notes written in the language of Scripture, is the answer to the question that has haunted this country for nearly 3 months. Who took Nancy Guthrie? The FBI is getting closer. The blockchain does not lie. The laboratory does not forget. And the profilers building this portrait have worked enough cases to know what this pattern leads to. We are watching. And we will be here the moment it breaks. Stay with True Crime Stories by Cole. Because this case is not over. And neither are we.